We are live.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this much awaited debate. We've been planning this debate for months together, and I'm finally happy it's happening. I welcome my 5 panelists. So let me introduce the panelists and then Dr. Dandekar will take over. Professor Abhijit Dandekar is Associate Professor of Epigraphy and Numismatics, Department of AIHC and Archaeology, Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute. He has specialization in the fields of epigraphy, numismatics, ceramic study, historical archaeology, and field archaeology. He has excavated sites such as Balathal, Sanjan, Chaul, Chinchani, and Junnar, and worked on the coins from excavations such as Junnar, Nagardhan, Vadnagar, etc. He has published articles in various academic journals. He will be the moderator of today's discussion. Our first panelist is Dr. Mugdha Karnik. She is Managing Trustee of the India Study Center Trust. She is a sociologist and educationist with special interest in science, education, archaeology, nature, and literature. She was the director of the Center for Extramural Studies at the University of Mumbai for 27 years. She is particularly active in the field of conservation and awareness. She has edited a coffee table book titled Centuries of Mumbai in English and co-edited a book titled Science Through the Millennium in Marathi. She is an active rationalist and writes on various relevant issues in print and electronic media. She is also a well-known translator and has translated a diverse number of books, ranging from the works of Ayn Rand to Richard Dawkins and a number of other significant works in the middle. Our next panelist is Vaishali Shroff. She is an award-winning author based in Mumbai. She's published over 250 stories, fiction and non-fiction, with Indian and international publishers: Penguin, HarperCollins, Oxford, Westland, Tulika, Pratham, Eklavya, Mango DC, Daffodil Lane, Books, Art First, among others. She loves writing about unexplored places, untold histories, unsung people, and giving agency to voiceless non-humans. She is the recipient of the Author Award 23, the best children's book for her work Batata Pau and All Things Portuguese, and twice recipient of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators USA Fellowship, among other recognitions. Her latest book, Tatung Tatung and Other Amazing Stories of India's Diverse Languages, is a call for action to keep our mother languages alive. She made her debut as a scriptwriter with Raja Saur, an Indian dinosaur movie, which has won many awards at film festivals globally, currently streaming on Disney Hotstar. She has been invited as a speaker to various literature festivals across the country, including the British Society for the History of Science. She loves talking to children over adults, forests over concrete jungles, and chocolate over anything else. And Shubhangi Kardile is Assistant Professor at the Department of Linguistics, Deccan College Postgraduate Research Institute. She holds a PhD in linguistics and an MA in linguistics from the Deccan College. Her research interests include linguistic variation and change, descriptive linguistics, language contact, and field linguistics. She completed a project on linguistic contact between Kolami, which is a Dravidian language, and Marathi, which is an Indo-Aryan language, in the Yavatmal district of Maharashtra as part of a UGC SAP DRS1 sponsored project on language contact in India. She has completed descriptive and ethno-linguistic work on the speech form of the Mahadev Kolis in Maharashtra and submitted it as her doctoral thesis. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to welcome our current panel. Also a warm welcome to Dr. Kurush Dalal, who is Director of the School of Archaeology at the India Study Center Trust, and a warm welcome to all our other participants. Now over to you, Professor Dandekar.
Yeah, thank you, Ramesh, for this your kind words. And thank you, Institution, for giving me this opportunity to become or to be the moderator of this very interesting debate on the custodians of language. Now, I'm actually an archaeologist, an epigraphist. So, my connection with language is basically an enthusiast and a reader. But when I do my epigraphy, well, I've been teaching and researching on epigraphy for a very long time, and I realized one very interesting thing, that the language or the preferred language, the language preferred by the kings, keeps on changing. For example, when you see the earliest inscriptions, the exhortations of Ashok, they're all in Prakrit. And Ashok, though he was a he was a big emperor, I wouldn't use the word great, it's very subjective, but he controlled a very vast area, and it seems that he was quite aware of it, that he was controlling a vast area, and there would be diversity within the empire. So if you look at his edicts in Bihar and his edicts in the eastern part of the subcontinent are in a different dialect. His edicts in Gujarat, in Maharashtra, in Kalsi, in North India are in a different dialect. His edicts in Shahbaz Ghadi, in Mansehra, in today's Pakistan are in a different dialect and in different script altogether. His edicts in Afghanistan again are in a different dialect and in different script. So much so that these scripts are quote unquote non-Indian script, Aramaic. So he definitely took care of his subjects. He knew that his, for want of any other word, his Sandesh had to be communicated in very good words and with no uncertainty in meaning to his people, because what mattered was the communication between him and his subject. And slowly you see the Satavahanas and other dynasties, they also use their own local dialect as lingua franca, as unofficial language. It is the foreigners, quote unquote, again, the Scythians, who start using Sanskrit as the medium of communication. And slowly Sanskrit makes its inroads in inscriptions. And by 4th century CE, you have very classical inscription. The first classical Sanskrit inscription happens to be in 150 CE, happens to have been written by, gotten written by Rudradaman. So you see these dynamics changing. And then in 4th century, 5th century, you see suddenly somewhere in Karnataka, northern Karnataka, you start getting Kannada inscriptions. And while all this is going on, Prakrit, Sanskrit, then Kannada inscriptions coming up somewhere in the southern Deccan, Tamil and Tamil inscriptions, the form of graffiti initially and then very elaborate inscriptions, they are continuing. So in the Tamil region, you see Tamil as the lingua franca. So slowly, I'm talking about Deccan now, slowly Kannada makes its inroads and becomes lingua franca. And then by around 10th century in Maharashtra, you start getting Marathi. Sanskrit somehow keeps its position, but it's kind of secondary in southern Deccan, but in northern and western Deccan, you see mostly Sanskrit inscription, but by 12th century, you see a lot many Marathi inscriptions. So people have been choosing different languages over time. So what I understood as an epigraph is that language, official language, language of communication is not a static phenomenon. It's continuously changing. It's a dynamic phenomenon. So that got me interested in understanding language from a different perspective. So I guess that is why I'm here today. And today I shall be basically posing questions to the panelists. And to begin with, I would say that understand the language in its totality, understand the functions of language, what a language is meant to do, what are its function. And I think linguistics has a very good answer to this question, So I would ask Dr. Shubhangi Kardile to begin with the functions of language as a linguist sees it.
A small intervention, sir. My
Yeah.
human error, I completely forgot to introduce Sanket.
Okay.
So just give me a second.
Yeah.
And Sanket Matre has been featured at the Kala Ghoda Arts Festival, Jaipur Literature Festival, the Glass House Poetry Festival, and the Vagdevi Lit Fest, among many others. His first book of cross-translated poems, The Coordinates of Us, co-written with English poet Rochelle Potkar, won the prestigious Raza Foundation grant after being shortlisted at iWrite 2020 at the Jaipur Literature Festival. Sanket Matre's poems have appeared in multiple anthologies such as Shape of a Poem, The Well-Earned, Home Anthology by Brown Critique, Collegiality and Other Poems, Poetry Conclave Yearbook, as well as literary magazines such as Sahitya Academy's Indian Literature, the Indian Yearbook 22, Roy Fanyan, Verum Literary Press, Free Verse Revolution, Carencia Press, The Piker Press, Punch, Borderless, Muse India, Madras Courier, the Usawa Literary Review, Men Matters Online, and many others. We're very thankful to have you, Sanket. Sorry about the goof up. But back to you as the panel.
Thanks a lot, Ramesh. Thank you.
Sorry, but I think even Vaishali is a panelist, isn't she? Yeah, Ramesh?
Yes, she was introduced.
Yeah. Oh, then I missed it. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Should we begin?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, Dr. Shubhangi, could you please throw some light on the language as a linguist sees it? You're on mute.
Can the admin unmute her?
Yes. Participants are allowed to unmute. Just a minute. Shubhangi ma'am, now.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. And to begin a debate about language, knowing about language is a good place to start. So the first function comes to mind when we consider language is communication. But there are different aspects of communication also, and that's where we talk in terms of, say, for example, if I say I'm in Pune, in that one I refer to myself, I refer to a person, and I also told you the time of this I'm being in Pune. So this is referring to a time, referring to a person, referring to a place. That is one of the functions of language. Which is called referential. Then, when we communicate with each other, especially from the speaker's point of view, the speaker can express their feelings. So something like, oh no, I lost the connection, or something like that. So that, oh no, or wow, the scenery is so good. So that wow is another function, and which is called emotive. Then there is a third function, taking into consideration the communication, that we saw the context. Then we have a speaker's point of view also, and then there is a addressee or the listener's point of view also. And especially when for example, taking the name, say for example, hey Ramesh, please unmute me, or something like that. So that is a conative function. And we also use, especially in social communication, say we want to say something to break the ice and then continue the conversation, or introduce ourselves, or in a market, for example, if we want somebody's help, or we may start a conversation like something like tomato kitne महंगे हो गए ना, and then we also continue the conversation. So this kind of function is considered as static function. And then of course there is another function, poetic function. So, uh, so for example, that is where the difference we can say that if you consider the on one level, it is about the animals and how they interact with each other and on. But of course, that is also a commentary on human society. So that there is a reference also. There are different characters and they are referring to each other and on. But there is also another layer to it, so that is also, we can say, poetic function, uh, or basically a more of a creative function of the language as well. And then we humans can talk about language. I mean, right now I'm doing the same thing. I'm talking about language. So I can use language to talk about language. So that is what is known as metalingual function. So these are the communication related features or functions. But of course, we also use language to identify ourselves, to assert our identity as well. So when I say I'm Maharashtrian, part of that identity is that I speak Marathi, or I understand Marathi. So that is also another quite important function as a society. Human being is a social animal, so that aspect is also important, and that function is also plays a role. So individually, on a community level, on a national level, we assert our identity through language, not just spoken form but written form as well. And we also use language for learning, thinking, reasoning. So basically, cognition. So that aspect is also there to the functions of the language. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Shubhangi, for telling us about different functions of a language. So, from merely a communicating medium to a medium for cognition and medium for identity. Uh, it's a very interesting thing. I mean, our entire cognition, so to say, is dominated by language because as humans, as animals, we tend to communicate with each other. And then that brings us to a very interesting question, which I always had in my mind. Uh, when humans were together and when they started speaking, as we see in the animals, the dogs, for example, world over speak one language. The animals world over, whichever species you take, speak one language. Why do we humans speak different languages? Could there be a one common language in the beginning, whose children and grandchildren and great grandchildren are today's languages? Can anybody just shed some light on it? I mean, of course, Dr. Shubhangi would be the right person, but all of you are experts in language. So, anybody?
Actually, I really wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about this. I'm sure that, languages, they're meant for human expression. They are meant for communication and all of that. And, that's a very wonderful way of understanding what's the main purpose of language, what's the main function. But I truly believe that languages, more than anything else, they come out of a certain need, which is also determined by geographical factors. And just to kind of throw light on this, there's a language, in a very remote part of this world, in a place called Canary Islands, which is quite isolated. And there's a language which is known as Silbo Gomero. And this language does not have any words. It's made fully out of whistles. So people whistle in a certain intonation, and they speak with each other. Because they all realize that all of them stay very far from each other. The houses are almost, a mountain apart. And words would be of no use. Okay, and that's the reason why they developed a different language, which was a language made fully out of sound, out of whistles. And this language is no longer an endangered language because people, who were staying in the city came back once again into this village where this language was spoken. And they demanded the government of that country to make this into an official language of that place. Okay. And to give a proof that this is an official language, people started speaking back into that language. So much so that the university of that particular area, of that district, had to kind of once again take that language back into its curriculum. And it is now taught very proudly to children and grandchildren and so on and so forth. So what I truly believe is that language does not just come out of a need because we need to express. It obviously comes out of a need to exist. I think in a lot of places, language becomes your identity just to let people know that I'm alive. And that becomes a very important function of language. In fact, it goes much beyond, your need for expression. It becomes your need for survival.
So may I add to your first question on the functions of a language? And Shubhangi ma'am, very nicely explained, how language could be a basic tool for communication, whether it's in its spoken form or written form or visual form or even through gestures. And in fact, if everything goes right, we may have our Indian Sign Language as becoming an official language soon. But I would like to share a recent anecdote. I was visiting Srinagar to talk to the children over there. And when the children started arriving in the hall, they started saying their hellos and good afternoons. And after everybody was seated, I just said, Salam alaikum. And all the children, the entire hall almost erupted with Walaikum assalam. And some girls even came to hug me. And just with those two words, I had become one of them. So I feel one of the most powerful functions of a language is to connect, bring us closer to roots, to give us that sense of belonging to not just our near and dear ones, but to a community. And that level of connection is you don't find anywhere else. That bonding that our matrubhashas or regional languages bring do not come with hellos or good afternoons. I'm not trying to downplay other languages, but it's just, it could be English as well. People who have mother languages as English would feel that connection, the same connection. My mother language is Gujarati, and when I meet people and when I say Kemcho, or it just brings out a very different emotion, like Ms. Shubhangi said. It could be an emotive function, but I just wanted to share this experience and say that that it goes beyond the realm of communication.
Yeah. So coming back to my question again, that could there be a common language of our great ancestors, one single language? And what could be the reason?
Since it has not happened so far, it's not likely to happen now. That is what I would say. And there is so much diversity already. It's a lovely diversity. So why would one do that? What is the import of your question? Why there was no language, or should there be a language?
Sorry? Your voice is cracking, ma'am. I couldn't get you.
I'm asking you whether you want there to be one language, or you're just trying to find out why there can't be one language.
I'm just curious whether there was one. Is there any work in that connection, or there is no language? If we don't have the answer, then that's fine. We don't need to know. Anyway, so moving on, since Vaishali ma'am talked about Matrubhasha, mother tongue. So what is this concept of mother tongue? Is there something called mother tongue? Or now when we have people marrying across ethnic groups and across languages, could there also be a father tongue? Then how do you decide, is your mother tongue first language? What exactly is the phenomenon?
As far as my knowledge goes, so mother tongue is a term given to the first language that a child is exposed to, and it is generally referred to as a mother tongue because the baby spends more time with the mother than anybody else in the family at that point of time. And we can even call it a parent tongue. These days we have bilingual families, where the mother and the father speak different, have been raised with different mother tongues or different parent languages. So it is generally a term that has been used for the first language in which a baby starts understanding this world, and that is generally the language that is spoken at home. And we spoke about our cognitive abilities, and our cognitive abilities are generally developed in that mother language. I'm going to use the term mother language here, or our matrubhasha, and it is these days at the age of, say, as young as 18 months, these children are pulled out of their home and put into schools where they are made to start understanding and learning in a language that's different than their mother tongue. And that is when it starts interfering with their understanding of the world. And for instance, we had, my parents had their complete education in Gujarati. Right? My mother topped university in math, but in Gujarati, and nobody in her family spoke English. And I always wonder that, if at all she was made to, start studying in English, I don't think she would have done as well as she did. And that is what happens to most children till they, reach a point where they are unable to go back to their root language. And there is also, especially in urban setups, you will notice that there is a certain amount of guilt and shame associated with speaking in mother languages, and especially in public areas. People do not want others to think that their child is probably studying in a vernacular medium school. English must be the medium of communication and education, and and that is one of the most important reasons why more and more children are moving away from their mother languages. And there is wisdom associated with any language. There is knowledge associated with any language. For instance, I have learned so much from my grandparents, and I don't think I would have learned so much had I not known my mother language and not known them in their language of expression. So there is a lot more to a language than just the written or the spoken form. And it's intangible, this indigenous language that all languages hold. And I feel that and that is one of the reasons why even though we may go about our functional lives, speaking in English, writing in English, studying in English, and that's absolutely fine. We are all here communicating with this one language. But at the same time, we must put in efforts to keep our mother language alive and encourage our generation as well as other, future generations to use the mother language in some form or the other. It would be through conversations, through songs, through movies, or and I think the onus lies with us at this point to ensure that the number of speakers in mother languages don't decline over a period of time. I mean, we are anyway losing, one language every 2 weeks. So, the rate of decline or the extinction of languages is far higher than we can ever imagine.
Right. Actually, what I really want to add to what Vaishali is saying, and, she's just made a very relevant point about, using or, letting the child learn more, in his or her mother tongue. A very important educationist called Ramesh Panse, who's been doing a lot for the education system. Once I happened to meet him, and I really, I asked him this question, that is it necessary for kids to learn in English? And his answer was very surprising, because he said that if a child tends to learn in his mother tongue, over any other language, there's an absolute and guaranteed percentage that a child will pick up concepts faster, be it mathematics, be it geography, be it history, and he'll be able to learn it even faster and even more efficiently. So I believe that mother tongue obviously plays a very important role in, in growing or in shaping a child's psychology. And that's obviously the reason why mother tongue is really necessary. If we really just trace our roots back to the nursery rhymes that we've been knowing since childhood, I think all of us would know that there's something called as Ringa Ringa Roses and things like that. But if you really trace the origin of these nursery rhymes, you'll understand that it was basically speaking about play, right? And if nobody knows that, then this is really important. If you go to any of the stories which we consider as fairy tales, which are Disney fabricated fairy tales, be it a Snow White or a Cinderella or anything else, if you really trace it back to the origin, like to the original story that was written by Hans Christian Andersen, or all of them, including a Thumbelina, these are extremely violent stories. The ending, the characters were obviously altered by Disney to make it look more presentable, which we today call as fairy tales. But technically, they are not fairy tales. They are extremely violent and full of gore. And obviously, I had written a column about it and I had sent it to teachers in our schools, asking them a very, very important question. Why can't our culture, why can't our languages facilitate our own stories? Why can't kids learn from an absolutely new syllabus which features stories that come from our own origin, from our own history, from our own roots? And that's one more point that I really think becomes very important, because mother tongue teaches you all of these stories. If you really like, if I just go back to my own language, which is Marathi, and there's this wonderful Marathi Bolgita, Marathi Bal Kavita, the ones that have been written by Mangesh Padgaonkar, the ones that have been written by Vinda Karandikar, and so many other poets. They've written some fabulous poems, which I truly think can become a part of the main curriculum. And that in itself is really, really necessary if we really want our kids and the coming generation to kind of start understanding our language and existence in greater detail.
Now, I mean, we brought this issue of mother tongue over here, and we are connecting the education, primary education. Essentially, everybody says that primary education needs to be in the mother tongue. Now, I would consider that if there are cross-ethnic marriages, then the dominant language would be the language of the kid, that the kid speaks at home. For example, if the father happens to be a Maharashtrian and mother happens to be a Bengali or a Gujarati, and the kid is growing up in a typical Marathi scenario, then his first language would be Marathi and not Gujarati. It could be the other way around also. If a father is Maharashtrian, mother is Gujarati, but they're essentially saying somewhere in some Gujarat city in Gujarat, and the entire scenario is Gujarati around the environment is Gujarati around the kid, then the first language of the kid would be Gujarati. So it makes sense that the kid takes education in Gujarati in that sense. So my again curiosity is that we have this concept of official language, and Hindi happens to be one of the official language. And when we talk about Hindi as the language, we all talk about the entire region, the entire Cloud Belt, Rajasthan, Himachal, everybody is Hindi. Now we all also know that Rajasthan is essentially either Mewadi or Marwadi or any other dialect that they speak. Himachali people speak something else, their own mother tongue, okay? But their education happens to be in Hindi. How do they cope with this? Or in Maharashtra, even if a kid from, say, Paratwada or Melghat goes to a Marathi school, his mother tongue is not Marathi. So are we thinking of that? Are we thinking only about the mainstream people and their mother tongue is essential? Then what should be the policy? As language experts, what do you think? What should be the policy in such cases?
Forget these minor languages. I mean, minor in the sense of numbers, speaking them. But definitely this was the issue when Ambedkar had to say, put down his foot and say, Hindi cannot be our Rajbhasha or anything. And every state is entitled to have its own language. And that was, we all know, it was a big issue, and finally it came through. But what you say is right, like even in Maharashtra, in any state, there are so many dialects. We have this saying in Marathi that every 10 kilometers or every 10 miles, dialect changes. So that is definitely a problem. But at the same time, we human beings have this great capacity to cope with. I know a Nepali boy had come to Aswali, where I had stayed, a Warli village. And he could not speak anything of Marathi. And they were asked to stay with a family, with a Warli family, for no less than 15 days. And some of them stayed on also. It was like from 15 to 30 days. And this Nepali boy and the Warli boy, both of same age, they developed great friendship. People used to wonder how they talk. They had no common words, absolutely no common words. The Warli did not know Hindi, even the Nepali boy did not know Hindi. But they were great friends. They used to roam around. They used to go into the jungle. So we have this capacity to overcome all barriers once we decide. That's the great part of being human. I will also add something from my own personal experience. Like my daughter and my son-in-law, they got married. He is a Malayali Keralite, and she is, of course, both of them have mastery over English, and they also love their own language. Now they are settled in Finland. I would not say father tongue or mother tongue. My grandson has two mother tongues. He speaks so fluently and with so much love in both the languages. He knows perfectly when to start in Malayalam, when to stop Malayalam and start speaking in Marathi. If I am around, he automatically switches on to Marathi. If his moo, the Muttashiyamma, is around, he automatically switches on to Malayalam. And in his Paiva Kuti, that the play group, he speaks Finnish. Absolutely nothing. He doesn't, he's just 2 years and 3 months old, and he doesn't mix up things. So I would say this is just a human capacity. Some may have less, some may have more, but this is possible. So all these issues around whether the language is comfortable, yes, they are true to some extent, but not always. Like we have the capacity to overcome them. That is why we can, you all must know, before this linguistic war started and people wanted to have Hindi as official language of the whole nation. Before that, all the Tamilians, Malayalis had taken it voluntarily upon themselves that they must learn Hindi, because it was a means of communication which could connect the whole of the country. The moment the government started saying Hindi will be official language, they all started resistance. They stopped going to their Hindi classes and they said, no, Hindi cannot be our language. Our language is Tamil. Especially the Tamilians were very, very strong about it. I'm sure Radha here can tell us, or even Ramesh can. Ramesh is younger for that, but Radha must remember some experiences from those days. Yeah, please continue.
Okay. So,
May I?
Shubhangi,
There are a lot of points here, but I'll start with the official language. There is a practical need for official language, because basically official language is for administrative functions. And that doesn't mean that when one language becomes official, that doesn't mean it is any better than any other language. The same thing can be seen when we come to language dialect issue. That is, generally language is considered as having a script, and there is a written literature available. whereas dialect is the spoken form. And in fact, say for example, in Marathi, there are really good two words, bhasha for language and boli for dialect. And that boli itself says that it's mainly a spoken variety. So there is a requirement, is a practical need for standardization, codification, but that doesn't mean that other varieties are any less, especially linguistically speaking, they are not any less. And especially the functions which we talked about, referential function, referring to something, or expressing your emotions, or thinking, reasoning, can be done in any variety. So that is one part. And another part was about the education. So I think by now that National Education Policy 2020 has officially said that multilingualism is a way ahead. And so I think it's not about along with what we teach, but it is also how we teach that makes a difference. That if you suddenly start loading children with writing skills in a language which they don't know, and so the script and they cannot really connect the grapheme, the written letter with a particular sound, obviously they will fall behind, and that's what happens, and the dropouts start. But if you introduce another language, say from small songs or nursery rhymes in that particular language, for that particular language, I think and children are in that age range where they can pick up more than one languages very easily. And as Mugdha ma'am was saying, that as early as 2 years old, even before that, if there is a multilingual environment around a child, they can communicate with in all two or the three languages, and they know how to use those language, with whom to use. So, for example, my niece, when they went to Japan, she was around 2.5 years old. So she was in a very good age where she could learn Japanese very easily. But my sister was also learning Japanese by at that time, and my brother-in-law knew quite well Japanese. So he started speaking to her in Japanese. So she started speaking Japanese with her father and Marathi with her mother. So uh, we have this capacity, humans have this capacity to absorb more than one languages and function in that. It's just I think the implementation and how you do it, that's where we fail quite a bit.
Now, Ramesh has brought in an interesting question. I'll just read the question. As Ramesh says, the question is, should the written language also become the prestige language? So how do you resolve this?
Sorry, just one very simple question. What exactly is the prestige language?
I guess it's the language of the elite. Ramesh, could you please unmute yourself and say?
I would say that must be the language of the ruling class, the class with means of not just survival, but the property class. That automatically becomes a prestige language. It should not become, but it does become. That is another capacity or negative capacity of human beings.
So it's basically, yeah, Ramesh.
So, for example, sir, in Maharashtra, the written dialect of Maharashtra is based on the dialect of Pune. So then we start seeing Puneri Marathi becoming the official Marathi, and everything else is seen as a dialect or a deviation from that. Is that just a social error, or is that a natural thing that happens?
Actually, what I really want to know is Puneri Marathi considered to be standard Marathi? I don't think so. I think, it has always been changing and it will always keep on changing. So, while we in the urban areas might think that that standard Marathi. It's not, because if you actually go to other parts of Maharashtra, obviously the dialect, the lehza, obviously even words change, because once again, they take the flavor of that particular land. So if you're talking about one Praman Bhasha, I don't think that there's a
That's
Praman
the
Bhasha.
Puneri Marathi.
Yeah, so that brings us
I mean,
to
Puneri Marathi itself has so many shades and colors. I will tell you, my mother was born in Pune, born and brought up in Pune, and she had education in Madras and whatnot. And my father was from Mumbai. But he used to read a lot. And he was not encumbered with, not really encumbered, but he was not affected by the other shades of the dialect. And whereas my mother was. And sometimes she used to drop the rustic Marathi, some words here and there, not the whole. The grammar used to be always correct, absolutely correct. I mean, the Praman Bhasha grammar. But he used to correct her. Oh, no, not this way. Asa nahi bolaयचं. That kind of thing. And she used to answer back. आमच्यात असंच बोलतात. It is correct. So Puneri, she was from Pune and he was not. So Puneri Marathi is not the true thing. See, the Brahminical class came from Pune and they were writing a lot. They were, I mean, compared to Mumbai or other cities, so much more literature was produced in Pune. So naturally, that was the impact, not the Pune region specific, but the classes specific. Pune definitely had a writing majority. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so this actually brings us to this. I mean, thanks for talking about this standardization and all. Common people, lay people have this notion of Shuddha Bhasha as against Ashuddha Bhasha. No? And those who say Shuddha Bhasha, they also tend to pronounce the sh very correct, in a very correct manner. So what is this? I mean, should we have, I mean, we have been discussing about this standardization, and Mugdha ma'am gave an example of her own parents. So why do people have such notions of Shuddha, Ashuddha? No? And Ramesh also used the word deviation, not variation.
Don't you think that?
Yeah, so can we just throw some light on this?
I will just add one line. This again is part of the class society, in the class which is related with the upper caste. Has become so. A teacher who knows his science very well and teaches his maths very well and still does ani pani. You see, if he cannot pronounce ana as na, he cannot say ani or pani. He is discarded, especially by the students who belong to that caste or class, who can say ani and pani. Like there is a famous joke about it. Banatla no man ki. This is how people were humiliated. That's sad, but it has happened. It happens. It still happens. Like my friend, the great literature and poetess, award-winning poetess, writer, Kavita Mahajan, she was not able to pronounce ana properly. And so many of the Marathi great sahitics humiliated. They used to talk behind her back. So that happens. That just happens. As I said, it's part of the language of the ruling class, language of the powerful.
Actually, I just want to, just add to this. This is sheer humbug. Okay, there is nothing called as Ashuddha Bhasha and Shuddha Bhasha.
Exactly.
Whoever has invented this, or whoever is speaking about this, even in today's context, is taking literature and is taking humanity several steps back. So, this question itself should not exist in the first place if there is Shuddha Bhasha or Ashuddha Bhasha, let alone discuss it.
It's embellishment of the language.
Right. I truly believe, and I'm greatly inspired by Bahina Bai, whose work comes straight from her fields. And there's obviously nothing called as Shuddha or Ashuddha because she understood and she had that sensibility in her own language and she expressed it that way. The same goes for any poet. The same goes for any author, anybody. A poet like Namdev Dhasal, who's a Dalit poet, obviously came with his own vocabulary that came out from his own existence and from his own survival. And then once again, none of us, including any academic or anybody, actually has the authority to say that this is Ashuddha Bhasha and this is Shuddha Bhasha, right? So honestly, there is nothing called as Ashuddha Bhasha. This is only a language of acceptance because this is humanity of acceptance. And I think we need to start looking at languages from that lens of humanity as well.
I would just like to add from a child's point of view, for any child, I feel that the purest form of any language is the language that their grandparents speak or what they hear. They don't know any better than that. And that is the purest form of language that they accept as Shuddha Bengali or Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Punjabi, Sindhi. And I think we should just consider that as the purest form, isn't it? Why go into beyond that? I mean, we are from one generation to another, the language does get adulterated in forms, and adulterated is one of the terms. We adapt. Language is a living entity. It constantly evolves and adapts itself to the geography, the people speaking it, and I think we should all nurture it in that way and let it grow and evolve, let it change its course, because I think that's what it's meant to do, and like going back to the first thing that Abhijit sir said about how King Ashok in those times thought about Prakrit, and, and we are all, we should all nurture the languages we speak in, and because that's our lingua franca. That is the language we communicate with each other, no matter where we come from, what our backgrounds are, and I think that is the pure form of language, the language in which we can communicate and connect with the best, not considering the technical aspects of it.
Right, I completely agree with this.
Yeah, I mean, would grammar play a part in deciding the distinction between Shuddha Bhasha and Ashuddha Bhasha? Some forms are grammatically correct, so would that be Shuddha? Some forms are considered to be grammatically wrong, so would that be Ashuddha? Using a wrong, quote-unquote, case while speaking, would that make an Ashuddha Bhasha? How would you distinguish technically?
Isn't it just like Vaishali said just now? It's better to say Prakrit Bhasha, natural Bhasha. Prakrit means Prakriti se utpanna hui, so natural.
So when I check my papers and when some student writes a wrong sentence, am I justified in correcting it or am I not justified in correcting it?
If it's a language paper and if your diktat is such, then it's a different thing. But like, for example, I will tell you in the Western Maharashtra and beyond that, sometimes even the gender changes. Women very commonly call themselves mi alo, mi gelo. Mi karto na.
Right.
So while speaking, it is for her, it is natural.
So should there be something called grammar or should there not be anything called grammar?
She writes that after learning grammar in her paper, in her written paper, then you're right to mark her wrong. I would say that.
Okay.
While speaking, yes, she can speak what is natural to her. But while writing, we have made certain rules and they should follow it. People should follow it. People try to follow it. But like my friend, a science teacher, used to say that in your language papers, if somebody writes, one should write food is digested in stomach. But in science paper, if somebody makes a mistake and says stomach is digested in food, we will still give full marks because we know that the person has made the right connection.
So a new aspect is added now, written language and spoken language.
Very.
So
Absolutely.
in written language, you need to have Shuddha Bhasha. I'm just asking.
Tell me, my question to this question is, do we really need to differentiate something as Shuddha Bhasha and Ashuddha Bhasha? And do we need to draw parameters for it?
So there would be, that's what my counter question to your question would be, should there be something called grammar? Should there not be something called grammar?
No, I truly believe that we need grammar. We need grammar when it comes to written text because it needs to follow certain things. But grammar is for the written word. Most of us know that we speak more, right? And colloquial is a completely different part of it. So I don't think that grammar can be a parameter if somebody is colloquially addressing something as something which is impure and pure. See, my worry is with this words impure and pure. My worry is not with the fact that we are setting parameters, we are setting grammar as a parameter. What I'm trying to once again address is the fact that we cannot say that a particular language is pure or impure because it does not follow or it follows certain grammatical, syntaxes. Rather, we should not be referring to languages as pure or impure, but something completely different. I like what Mugdha ma'am said, that it should be Prakrit language, which is natural language, which is absolutely neutral and it does not have an adjective before or after it.
But Ramesh has raised a very valid point here. Grammatically correct or grammatically incorrect, and that will be considered only when you write something, not otherwise. But now, for example, even for writing, there is this whole new phenomena of writing on social media, where people just want to express themselves and they may write absolutely grammatically incorrect sentences and whatnot, but still they communicate. They are successful in communicating their feelings, their opinions, which otherwise they would not have. So this is not a holy cow. That much if we understand, then that's fine. Let's go ahead. If somebody is going to be masters in Marathi language or any language as such in literature, then it's okay. Then they must be correct grammatically.
Shubhangi, would you like to say something?
Yes. The one thing is that whether we use language in any form, there is always grammar. It cannot be put away because grammar is basically structure. So whether it's a sign language, whether it's a spoken language, whether it's a written language, and whether even there is a mix language where you put Hindi and Marathi or English Marathi together, and generally that you will find that there is always a pattern to that mixing also. So you cannot really put the grammar part away from the language. And again, incorrect or correct, wrong, there is always a context there. So, for example, Mugdha ma'am said that if in a language paper, if you are writing down something and or as an answer, if you are say, for example, active voice ko passive voice mein badal ke likho. So there, if you are writing your answer and you make a mistake and which actually mistake like which wouldn't make any sense, then of course you have to talk in terms of correct and incorrect. So I think there is always a context when we make use of correct and incorrect. And once we decide that there is a certain codified form of a particular variety is to be used for this purpose, I think the rules also come along with that and they have to be followed. Otherwise, there could be possibilities of miscommunication. That's why. And I agree with totally that the words like pure, impure, shuddha, ashuddha shouldn't be used, but people do have these opinions. And that's what I'm saying. They are opinions, and people have them because of either they don't really understand something or they are not tolerant. And again, one of the points Mugdha ma'am also said that there is language is not in a void. There is a context here. We use language. Earlier, one of you said that language is used for connection, but humans also make use of language, or say abuse language for distancing themselves also. So there is always these emotional, social, political uh, aspects are always attached to how we speak and what we speak. So I mean, we can always try to tell people that don't say uh, don't say pure or impure, or don't say shuddha ashuddha. Just say that there is a difference here. So that's a linguist's take on these.
Okay.
Grammar is a skill which is acquired, going beyond the prakrit or the natural. Grammar is a skill, and there is no harm in feeling proud about your acquired skills. It's good. It's good to know somebody writes very correct, grammatically correct Marathi or Hindi or Sanskrit for that matter, or Tamil or any language or English. But that doesn't become like the absolute skill. It cannot become ashuddha. The other varieties cannot become ashuddha, impure. They are just grammatical.
So can we say in a limited sense, just curious, that grammarians in a sense are in a limited manner, in a limited way, custodians of language?
It's a very interesting question. It's really, really a very interesting question. But no, I don't think grammarians are custodians of language. Neither do I think that statesmen are. Neither do I think poets are. Neither do I think artists. I think, for me at least, the real custodians of the language are the people who speak that particular language, because it is meant to be democratized, and it is meant for these people to survive in a place and to make sense of their own world. I don't think anybody can be a custodian of language for any particular means. I think we truly need to understand that anybody, let's say a grammarian or a poet or an artist or anybody, we are just enhancers of language. We are not custodians in any form. If possible, we enhance a particular language, we give it new words, we understand the context of society, and we try enhancing our language, we try improving our language than what it was yesterday. With every new complexity in our society, we come up with new feelings as well. We come up with new sensibilities, and it's our job to kind of add words or give words that come closest to that experience, to that anubhuti. But that does not make us custodians of anything more than anything a language. I think language will always belong to the people that it stays in, and it will always be the people who will choose to use that particular language or to move to something else or to change it entirely. So it cannot be under any watchtower per se.
Now, there's a question on YouTube by Biplav Belel. He asks, does Prakrit language, into bracket natural language, not have rules? So his question is basically, even if you say it's natural language, does it have any rules?
I don't think the spoken form of Prakrit language has any rules, because that's what I feel. I don't know the technical details, but for instance, I'm just giving a common person's example. Say we have English now. We speak in Hindi and English, and we speak. We add words from even other languages, not just new words in the same language, and I don't think there are any rules there. For example, jugaad is a word in the dictionary in Oxford. And, I've had a friend who's done thesis on how jugaad is done in London. And there are so many such terms that have entered in dictionaries of other languages. And so I feel the spoken language, like I said, it keeps growing, and there are no rules there. And, and I think the best way to put it is with context, with need, the language keeps evolving, the vocabulary keeps evolving. And so, yeah, my take is that I don't think that there are any rules that govern a spoken form of Prakrit language. Written form, I think I'm not expert enough to comment on.
Yeah. Somebody also would like to say?
May I say something? As I said again, grammar, if you take the word in the context of a school, in the school system, then we have a kind of a fear and feeling of avoidance there. And probably that is because it is imposed on you. But as I also said, that when I also started learning linguistics, I realized that grammar is nothing to fear about, or even though in the school system it was imposed on me, but basically grammar, any language, whatever you say, whether it's be it any language, even a mixed language like English, you will always find that there are certain patterns. In a school system, we call them rules because we want to teach a particular language in a particular way, and that's why we call them rules. But basically, grammar is just a structure of that language. How you put those, say, a subject, say, I am in Pune. So how do you put that in a particular language like English? And that's the rule, or that's the order in which you put that. If you do it in a different way, of course you can do that. But if you do it in a different way, you may not be understood by some others. So again, whether a language is a written form or an oral form or sign language, there is always a structure there. And that is what is called grammar.
See, while we are asking this question, I truly believe that obviously language needs to be regulated. Obviously, it needs to be regulated because we need to have rules about what's the best way of speaking. Or else, everything is going to be absolutely unruly. And to that effect, obviously, grammar regulates our language, which is true. But that does not mean that, so regulation is one part, but being a custodian of a language, which means that somebody external of that language is really, really responsible and answerable to that language for somebody outside. I don't think that really exists as as a question itself. I'm sure that, people are the real custodians of that particular language. But I don't think that there is any outside authority or any governed authority that says that, hey, you know what? I'm responsible for this language. I can have the power to change this language. I don't think anybody actually has that.
Okay, so Biplav, as Dr. Shubhangi answered, there would be some structure to any language. So in that way, Prakrit will also have grammar. And I remember to have learned grammar of Prakrit when I learned Prakrit. So as the language. So definitely there was grammar, there were different cases and different forms of words according to cases, gender, and so on and so forth. So definitely it would have, any language would have structure. Otherwise, as Sanket said, it would become very unruly. And you wouldn't, the basic concept of the language, basic need of or basic objective of the language would be lost, right? You won't be able to communicate. If the rules or the structure is mutually not recognizable, then there wouldn't be any communication. So I would be speaking in Marathi in my own way, Shubhangi would be speaking Marathi in her own way, and there would be, cross purposes everywhere. So as long as both of us follow the same set of structure, we are able to communicate with each other. So having said that, I guess we also talked about languages, function of the language as means of identity. And in today's world, you see, especially in Maharashtra, when I observe this, that language has become so much uh, entrenched with the concept of identity that you actually have agitations about having board signages in Marathi. Does that make any sense? Because when I see that the board in quote unquote Marathi says that shopper stop, is it really Marathi? The word, the words shopper stop, both are in English. Or when I write my institute's name in Marathi, Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, is it really Marathi? So how do we, tackle this misconception? What do you think as language experts? And there was some, I remember some years back, there was some agitation in Bangalore that when they started Bangalore Metro, that the station names should only be in Kannada. They should not be in, Devanagari. In Hindi, as they said, it should be only in Kannada. Whereas Bangalore happens to be a global city and people from all over the place go to Bangalore. And if they are traveling in a metro, they wouldn't understand where to get down. So such basic functions are also, they also get attached to this notion of identity. So how do we, tackle this issue?
I think Kurush sir wants to say something.
So if I may, I think, we are, as Dr. Andikar said, we are taking this to ridiculous limits. Today, when I catch a train in Mumbai, going to Navi Mumbai, I get announcements in 3 languages. It has become a standing joke. It is one of the most irritating things for regular train goers. Fudil station, Kharghar. Agla station, Kharghar. Next station, Kharghar. And then this will repeat at least twice before the arrival of Kharghar. I mean, what has it achieved? And when the Gujaratis say there are 17% Gujaratis in Kharghar, we want an announcement Gujarati. Then the Odias say there are 4% Odias in Kharghar, we want the announcement notice Odia. There are a large number of Indian languages which are officially recognized. Forget about the unofficial ones. Where do we stop? Where do we draw the line? How ridiculous does it get if there isn't one language that the nation follows? At some point, the nation needs, for administrative purposes, for organizational purposes, this kind of requirement. When we became an independent nation, it was decided that we would use the English alphabets and numbers for all our number plates on vehicles so that it would make it pan-Indian and it would make sense. But parochialism raised its head, and parochial political outfits in Karnataka will have their number plates in Kannada, in Maharashtra will have them in Devanagari, and so on and so forth. And you cannot crack down on them because this is their, they are voicing their, pride in their statehood. So this kind of nonsense, not nipped in the bud, leads only to fractionalizing society. This is not the use of language to bring people together. This is actually an incredibly divisive language platform. And people who study language, people who talk about language, need to start addressing these issues. That's what I feel.
So actually, I would really like to talk about what Mr. Kurush sir said. I know I don't agree with him for a very simple fact that, actually the buck stops with the state language. Let's say if you are in, Chennai, let's say if you are in Bengaluru, or let's say if you are in Kerala, you need to respect that the language of that state. And that needs to be followed through and through. The same goes for Marathi, the same goes for Gujarati. Let's say if a person is staying in Maharashtra, the announcement obviously needs to be made in Marathi. Now, if 12% Gujarati start saying that, we need an announcement in Gujarati, that's not the state language. But if the same case happens in Ahmedabad or in any other Gujarat state, obviously it needs to follow that state language as well. And this is where your entire sensibility as a person who believes in diversity comes forth, where you obviously say that, hey, you know what, I respect the language of that state, and I respect the language of this country as well, and I need to follow both. Beauty about this country, I know for a fact that political parties have obviously turned this into a divisive element, and which is true. But then once again, it has to be the sensibility of people, and how they perceive language in a particular way. So although it might be the case that there are multiple languages in a particular city like Mumbai because it is cosmopolitan, still the state language is obviously important, and it needs to be followed. I genuinely don't think that there's a problem when somebody writes shopper stop in Marathi and also in English, because a person, let's say, who comes from an absolutely un-English background would still want to know what do those words mean. So just saying that we need to follow English as one language, or we need to follow Hindi as one language, and there should just be one language that the nation follows, is technically a practical joke, because I don't think it should be, more than anything, I don't really think it should be the rule that there should be one language. India is obviously, it's a hotbed of languages. It's almost 1,250 languages spoken. So obliterating those languages and saying that there'll just be one language that people follow, would actually create more division than unity.
So what you're saying, Sanket, basically is state identity before national identity, and a state identity that is artificial. Because Marathi is not the language of the
state identity. No, what I'm trying to say is a state identity along with a national identity.
Yeah, but the state is Maharashtra, but the Konkan does not speak Marathi; they speak Konkani. In certain areas, they speak Irani.
If I may interrupt, my question was about signages, about shopper stop. Writing in English and writing in Marathi are wrong notions. They write in Roman script and they write in Devanagari. So should we get sucked into this politics of language where there's actually a convenience of scripts? And the person who is sitting inside that shop, a Marwadi or a Sindhi, he doesn't belong to any of these languages. His language is different.
I mean,
but for the sake of business, he would use, say, a Devanagari or a Marathi board or an English board. So there, the function of the language is just to communicate that this particular shop sells these many things. A general store or a food store or a pan ka thela, whatever it is. Where the function of the language is very limited. Should we get sucked into this politics of identity over there? Is my question and is my worry.
Can I actually say something about this?
Yeah.
If you actually visit, Mumbai as a city, and if you actually look at the names of buildings, you'll understand the difference. Okay. If you look at the names of our buildings, it's generally all anglicized. Okay. Heavenly Paradise, Silver Crescent, Daffodils, and things like that, which are no way connected to our language. Okay. If you actually go to Pune, and if you actually look at the names of the buildings, they are far more poetic and far more beautiful, and they are far more entrenched in their own roots. There's
may I interrupt, please? I'm sorry, but I may want to interrupt. The building names that you took right now are just very recent. Where I grew up, we always had Ashok Nivas, Ram Nivas, Lalit Sadan, Ramayan, and a lot of Indian names written in English. And growing up, I never saw names or any signages as a child. I do not remember written in Marathi, in the Devanagari script. it was only English in the Roman script. And I feel this is a trivial matter. You want to read it in English, you read it in English. You want to read it in Devanagari, whatever works for you, as long as the message is communicated, or the signage is communicating what it is meant to. I don't feel we need to. I think there are bigger issues, language issues that need attention than this.
No, I understand. I completely understand this. All I'm just trying to say is that, anything that follows its own language and follows the course of that language obviously looks much more natural and much more vivid. I generally don't think that we should be forcing a third language, which is in this case English, just to be a part of this, because we've been following that. I truly think that languages can obviously change. And obviously we can make two languages a part of our system as well, because we have been learning this school. Like, we've been learning this since school time. So I really don't see what's the problem here.
Okay, so another question that is from Dipesh Karmarkar, PhD. This is from YouTube. How might early exposure to these above ideas help shape children's understanding of languages as dynamic and interconnected, countering the notion of languages as isolated entities? Should I repeat the question? The panelists, should I repeat the question?
No, I'm reading the question. May I take this?
Sure.
As an advocate for, as a representative of children, here in the panel, and I would say that children love learning languages, and I feel parents, the same enthusiasm with which they teach their children German and Spanish and French and Mandarin and Japanese, and there's nothing wrong with that. I myself know French and Spanish, and my children know Mandarin and Spanish as well. I feel with the same enthusiasm, we should introduce children to at least spoken form of the mother language, or the language that is spoken, or the parent language, or the language is spoken at home, simply because it broadens their understanding of a certain knowledge base that does not exist in another language. For instance, on a recent trip to Jim Corbett, in the forest, I love to note down names of trees. And there were 3-4 trees names that I asked my forest officer to tell me. And I asked him, I said, I've never heard of these names. And he said, they are in Garhwali. And I said, is there any Hindi name for it, or is there any English name for these trees? And he said, no, madam, these are the only names, and it is only the local Adivasis who know them. They know the uses, they know the purposes, they know how exactly to use the bark of the tree, to the leaves, to the roots. And tomorrow, if there are no Garhwali speakers, that entire knowledge base is lost. This is especially applicable to the biodiversity of the regions. We have millions and millions of, and we are, I'm talking in context that we are only talking about languages that are spoken in tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities, and so on. And we are, according to the latest research by Professor G.N. Devi, we have about 850 languages. We've already lost 250 in the last 50 years. And we have 19,500 dialects. Those are languages which do not have a written form, and hence they are not acknowledged as and proper languages. So, and what about those millions of people, who do not have any literature to read, who do not have any education, and they are forced to learn other languages? So I feel that we need to sensitize children that at an early age, that the dominant languages that they speak in the cities are not the only languages. There are millions of other people who exist in our country who speak other languages and who are deprived of their right to express in the language that they want to, just because they do not have an official status. And so one thing is to sensitize children. Second is to encourage multilingualism with Indian languages. We enjoy the status of being such a diverse country, and why not, keep that diversity going? And I had posed a question in the chat earlier, is that there's one gap that I feel that needs to be addressed as a system at large, is that we more than ever right now, migrations are happening, interstate migrations are happening because of economic reasons. People are moving from one state to another or one city to another for jobs, and they are many times they find themselves in places which is not where the dominant language that is spoken is not their mother language. So what happens to those children? Those children study in the 3-language formula, depending on, or 2-language formula, depending on what state they're going to. Okay, but still there is no system in place where they can, they are able to learn how to speak and write in their own mother language. I mean, I have very dear friends from Pune who have moved to Sweden, and that child is the only Marathi child in that school, but they've still procured got a Marathi teacher to teach that, because that is a kind of emphasis they leave. Of course, it is Sweden, and they can afford it, and we are just too many people to come up with one solution to this problem. But I feel, as people, if we even start thinking about these problems, that gaps and address them at individual levels, I think we can make progress and ensure that children stay connected to their roots as much as possible. I hope I've answered to the question to some extent.
Yeah. I think Guru sir has mentioned, like, he's asked a very lovely question, who will teach children that their mother tongue isn't necessarily better than any other? And I think it's once again our onus. I mean, we are the ones who will tell them, that their mother tongue is obviously, the first and foremost that they need to learn. And that's really, really important. I think it's all our onus, how we shape this and how we bring it to the next generation.
So are parents custodians of mother tongue?
I think the term mother tongue, Dr. Dandekar, is
we are using it only for the sake of convenience.
Yeah. So if we use it for the sake
of
it
very loosely. Yeah.
Let me give you a simple example. I'm a Parsi. We speak Gujarati at home. It's a very funny, bastardized form of Gujarati. Most Gujaratis think it's hilarious. We don't speak Farsi. We don't speak Persian. We've been in India for far too long for that. The simple, long and short is, I went to school with the 3-language formula. I went to an English medium school. I studied in English along with Marathi first and then Hindi. I went on to a boarding school, and I had a choice of dropping Marathi and picking up French, which I did. Later in life, I realized that I really needed to be better in Marathi and went to Deccan College. And my friends said I had very good English. I said they had very good Marathi, and we decided to speak to each other in these languages. I benefited greatly. I don't know if my friends did.
Similarly, I did.
Thank you, Abhijit. Similarly, at home, my parents and my grandparents spoke to me in Gujarati along with English, and ensured that I learned to speak and understand even colloquialism in Gujarati. I'm terrible at writing and reading it. I kind of miss that, but it hasn't stopped me from doing anything. I honestly feel, guys, call this a privileged option or whatever. I feel that all our children need to be able to communicate with each other in one language. We need to be able to communicate with the world ultimately in one language. If we need to publish in one language, which is not the language we are most comfortable in, that becomes more and more difficult later on. So if we need to do research on an international basis and share that research, I have so many problems when I'm trying to read something written by somebody from Japan. Because in Japan, they publish only Japanese. The Chinese are now publishing madly in English, and the impact that they're having is phenomenal on world science, literature, blah, 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 you name it. Because they've realized this. After being very xenophilic, they've realized that they have to engage with the world in general. So if our children need to engage with the world and they need to engage with their mother tongues, then you need a common lingua franca for Indians, which I think English does a very good job of, because it's nobody's mother tongue. So nobody's got a crib over here, and you learn your mother tongue along with it. But again, who will bell the cat?
Yeah. Okay, there is
May
one
I
more.
say something?
Yeah.
I think some attempt to put the who will teach the cat or who will bell the cat, that question, that there is a mechanism, not mechanism, there is a policy available. And as I earlier also said, that it's the idea on the paper that you encourage multilingualism in the school, and you don't immediately teach writing in another language, but gradually introduce them to first the spoken form and then the written form. So there is a good policy available. There is I mean, especially the NEP 2020 has that those aspects in that policy. It's the once again, it's the implementation where the many problems are there. And also, we need to be, I mean, we have to make people more aware about these issues, that these are the practical problems, these are the other problems, and how you kind of reconcile both. That's what I think.
Okay. Now, Shreyadhar on YouTube asks a question. If English/Roman script is completely removed from our signages, would that not demote international tourism? So
Can I take this one?
Yeah, sure.
No, I don't think it would actually demote international tourism, because let's say if you go to Rome, if you go to France, if you go to any other country, if you go to Europe, not necessarily do they have their signages in English. Okay, let's say if you go to an Asian country like like Singapore, Malaysia, whatever, they do have signages in their own language, and we tend to follow that. In fact, we take pride in learning that particular language till we are over there. We take pride in speaking in that language with those locals, and we come back and we brag about it that when I went to so and so country, I kind of learned these few languages, or I learned so many words in that particular language. So I think it would be the same thing once if a person comes here and obviously reads something which is in a local dialect or which is in the state language per se. And obviously, I mean, I really don't think that it would really impact international tourism. In fact, I think it's the other way around, that anybody who's able to seep into our own local culture and languages would actually relate more and more with our country.
Yeah, and nowadays, thanks to our godfather, godmother, Google, we have Google Lens. It actually translates everything for us. So signages in any script would, Google Lens would be able to do the translation for the tourist. Anyway, Ramesh sir has told us to wind up, but before we wind up, Ramesh, अभी तो रात शुरू हुई है. So we will, exceed some time, I think. I mean, all the panelists are all now heated up, and we are getting into this mode of heated arguments and heated debate. And one of these issues, I'm sure, that I'm going to raise now is the flexibility and ability of a language in adapting this changing scenario, the changing technology, new machines coming up, new concepts coming up, and ability of that language to adapt and to coin new words for it, flexibility. And related to it is the question of this new movement that has started of purification of language. I mean, just to give you a quote from a medieval Marathi poetry, there's a poetry by a poet called Narendra. He's talking about the biography of Sri Krishna, Krishna Charitra. And while talking about it, he says that, they say, ऐक्यता श्रीकृष्ण चरित्र होय सकळ सुखाचे क्षेत्र वरी जोडे ब्रह्म सुख पवित्र ते मराठी बोलईन. So he's making a statement over that I will speak only in Marathi. And he says that he talks about Marathi here, saying that जिथे भाषेची रसवृत्ती सा भाषांचे कुपे कीजे ती निगुती ते मराठी कवण जाणे निरुती जे रसांचे जीवन. And he tells us here that apart from the greatness of Marathi, that is full of life and full of essence, he says that this language has the extract of 6 languages. सा भाषांचे कुपे कीजेती निगुती. So probably Maharashtra Prakrut, Apabhransh, Ardhamagadi, Shauraseni, Paishachi, all these different dialects of Prakrut at that time. Marathi has, all these together. Now, this is definitely a pre-Arabic influence or pre-Farsi influence Marathi. So he's talking about Marathi having influence or having the mixture of 6 languages. In the course of time, Marathi also received heavily from Arabic, Farsi, Kannada, English, Gujarati, so many languages. And now there is a movement that I see on Facebook, on social media, that should we remove this particular word because it is Urdu? Or should we remove this word? Do we have any other word for this? There is a community on Facebook called Marathi Shabda, and they always come up with this new. What should be the word for artificial intelligence, for example? What should be the word for so and so? Such concept, which is completely new concept. So, getting into the artificially purifying the language, making Marathi inflexible, and slowly becoming more and more irrelevant. So what do the experts think about it?
Dr. Dandekar, this is not something new or Indian or Maharashtrian. I remember years ago, the newspapers in Britain had a field day by announcing that the French had cancelled the weekend. The French were very upset that there were too many English words entering the French language, and they decided to axe those words. And one of the first words on the list was le weekend. And that le weekend would no longer be called le weekend, but there wasn't a word for this in French. So the British absolutely, they typically wry, sarcastic humor, had a field day. Now, when I was studying, I love trivia. I was thrilled to find out that there was an official word for mobile phone in Hindi, Brahman Dhwani Yantra. What I loved about that fact was that nobody that I knew used it. Zara tuza mobile de, mi zara mobile varti boltoy. Nobody said, mi Brahman Dhwani Yantra varti boltoy. Dura Dhwani Yantra kute ahe. Nahi, phone kute hai. So, there was no reason for these words to come in. That the word in the language in which it had originated could very easily be used in all the languages of the world, as long as you looked at where this object originated. And this is all that we need to do. We need to stop getting parochial about these things. No language is pure. No language is should. Every single language has so many influences. And that beautiful Marathi poet writing about Sri Krishna forgot to mention that Sri Krishna never spoke Marathi. So, on that note,
probably he was aware of it.
Yes,
that didn't make any difference to his.
Just one thing. Just one thing that I would like to add here. It's a very, very small thing, but there are so many words that do not exist in our dictionary. Like, for example, today when I was translating a Bangla poem in Marathi, I realized a very important thing. There's no Marathi equivalent to this word for cowbell. Okay, so there's no word in Marathi that exists for cowbell. When I actually told this back to the Bangla poet, he was absolutely surprised. He said, "How come you guys never had a word for this?" And then I had to actually consult a translator and say that there's no such word, and I've been trying to find this. And that's when the translator kind of told me that you have the authority to create a new word. Okay, if a particular word does not exist, you have the absolute authority to create it. Okay, and with a very wonderful passing sentence that if artists, poets, if novelists, authors, if they are the ones who cannot give back to the language, then who will? And I think that becomes our duty as well. And I'm not saying that it becomes our prime duty, but in many ways, it becomes our responsibility that wherever we find these particular gaps, and if there isn't a word, we can give rise to words. And that's the beauty of languages, that they can accommodate all of this and still leave much more room for improvement.
What is the Bangla word for cowbell?
So the Bangla word for cowbell was something else, which I don't remember. But the closest that we come to, or the closest word that I came up with was go ghanta, which is what I created because there was nothing else. Technically, a cowbell would be referred to as gaicha gayat asleli ghanta. Okay, but there's no one word. Okay, the same thing. There's a word in English called jaywalking, but there's no Marathi equivalent to that. So, I mean, we can always come up with a word for it.
Sanket, can I split hairs here and say it should be ghanti, not ghanta? Because ghanta means a large bell that is hung in a temple, whereas ghanti means a small bell.
Yeah, now once
Just
again.
splitting hairs.
Yeah. So once again, it has room for improvising. And see, once again, it can once again lead to a different debate and obviously enriching. But yeah, I mean, that's the beauty about it.
Yeah, Shubhangi.
We started, or the title of the debate was that who are the custodians of language, and the Hindi word kotwali, kaun karega. So there has been different answers also coming, but I think if by custodian we mean that we are responsible for safety and healthy growth, then we all are custodians in that way. But I don't really think that if you take the meaning of that word gate as a gatekeeper, as you mentioned, that if you restrict language and make it, then it becomes irrelevant. So it is no longer it's no longer functions as even a communication medium. So if we are talking about gatekeepers, then no, sorry, that's not the meaning of custodian in this particular case. So in one way, we all are responsible for it because we all use it. So we are to some extent responsible for it. And that's my take on that.
Vaishali, would you want to say something?
The onus lies with us. I'm not a purist in any way, and my thoughts align with Kurush sir's a lot. But having said that, I do not believe that one language, one nation is the solution. We must encourage learning of more languages. We must understand, because in the course of writing my book Tatung Tatung, I have not learned the technicalities behind languages, but I have learned so many stories from like the deepest and remotest part of our country. For example, in 2010, there was a language called Koroaka, which was discovered by Nat Geo, the endangered language program run at MIT. And it is only spoken currently by 1,500 to 2,000 people. But they have one word for entire experiences. And people, they've had to move to speaking more dominant languages, and people over there readily do that because then they are considered as outcasts if they speak in their own languages. Nobody marries their children, and so on and so forth. So to be a part of the whole society of the fiber and be accepted as part of normal society, they start speaking dominant languages. But there are some people who are trying to keep their language alive by making visual dictionaries. Because there is no script for Koroaka. So a similar sister language called Rusoaka exists, and they are trying to, because one of the reasons why scripts don't exist for certain languages is because there are phonetic differences in the languages. So they are trying to use the Rusoaka script and create a dictionary for future generations. And the 1,500 people have taken the complete onus in the absence of any state support. They have taken complete onus of teaching the children Koroaka since birth. through this dictionary, through conversations, because as older generations start perishing, there is nobody left to have conversations with. And that is how speakers, there are no speakers existing for certain languages, just like we had Senior Boa who passed away, one of the oldest Andamanese languages that is more than 70,000 years old doesn't exist anymore. But according to Padma Shri Professor Anvita Abbi, songs have a longer shelf life than words. And I would like to end at the note that let's keep singing songs. Let's continue playing our antaksharis at home and sing mukhadas and antras and keep our languages alive. And on that note, I really have to leave. Thank you, Institution. Thank you, Ramesh sir. Thank you, Kurush sir, Mugdha ma'am, Abhijit sir, Shubhangi ma'am, Sanket, and everybody who's in the audience. It's been an honor for me to be a part of this esteemed panel. And I think we must continue having these discussions. They are vital. And, that's how we start making difference where difference needs to be made. Thank you.
Vaishali, you could give me 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now Vaishali is also leaving. Mugdha ma'am has also left. So I think it's time to wind up now. We had a wonderful discussion, started with the academic debate on the functions of language, adding to the more experiential aspects of languages to it. And then, discussing about, Shubhangi actually expanded the notion of, or the meaning of the word custodian, distinguishing between gatekeepers and kotwali. So we need to understand that all of us together are custodians of the language, whichever language we speak, we cherish, we emote, we communicate, everything. So the responsibility, I think, lies with all of us, the entire society, to take care of our language if we want our language to be alive, to grow, and to prosper. Ramesh, a request personally from me, can we consider this to be part 1 and have another part 2, talking more about the scripts and language dynamics, because I'm also a man of scripts.
Very much. I would be very happy if that happened.
Yeah.
Because, the language conflict happens in so many ways. What is the written form of a language? Like when I was learning Konkani, Konkani has 4 scripts. Devanagari, Roman, Kannada script. So then what is the original script? Sanskrit has no official script only. So yes, there is conflict there. So although this debate was supposed to be focused on intra-language conflict, it did touch a lot on inter-language conflict as well. So we will have more debates, and I think this was an experiment by Institute Trust, and I think we should have more debates on more subjects. So language is like heritage, right? If we don't own it, then nobody owns it.
Yeah.
So we are the co-custodians. If we all decide to give up our language, that's our collective tragedy. But at the same,
someone standing in for Mugdha ma'am. Technically, I'm Mugdha ma'am just now.
Yeah.
I think it's a fabulous idea, Ramesh. We must explore more such debates.
Yeah. So on this positive note, shall we all depart?
Thank you so much.
Happy Independence Day to all of you.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of Institution, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good night, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Yogini, thank you very much for